I began last week's episode with a lament for Millicent the cat, who we had to put to sleep recently. And I said that if you're keeping track at home, that is in the past year a marriage, a father, and 2 cats that I have lost. And in the couple of hours before and after we said goodbye to Millicent the cat, I got to thinking about all of the stuff that I just talked about. And there was a moment, not exactly of weakness, but a moment of suffering. And what came into my mind was the book of Job. The book of Job in the Bible, which I understand is pretty self-indulgent, but it was an emotional moment. And the book of Job, if you're not familiar, is kind of the go-to wisdom in the Bible about people who are suffering in the human experience. And I thought, well, let's dig into Job, see what it can tell us about suffering. And I'll be honest with you, didn't get a lot of great answers from it, but it remains a compelling podcast topic, and I shall attempt to wax semi-eloquent about it this week. I'm going to paraphrase a lot of this as much as I can because it goes on and on and on. It reminded me a lot, actually, when I started digging into it, of Shakespeare. Normally, that would not be a complaint. Okay, I studied English literature. I have taught Shakespeare. I'm a Shakespeare guy. But you know as well as I do that it can be demanding. And there are a lot of times when you're reading through Shakespeare and you get to the end of a stanza and you think, what on earth was that about? And then you've got to go back and think it over and look into it. The book of Job is much the same. Much of it is very poetic. A lot of the language is actually quite powerful. But it's one of those ones, especially depending on the translation you're using, which is just a head scratcher. And you're like, what? What? And I looked at a few different translations of it. And I will say right now, it's good to listen to. All right, it's a long narration, but I listened to a couple different ones of different translations of the book, and there are zillions of different translations of the Bible, okay? But some of them are put into more modern language. Those are the ones to go for. And there was one that was translated by Stephen Mitchell. Stephen Mitchell's work is great. My copy of the Tao that I refer to is a Stephen Mitchell translation. And there is on Spotify a Stephen Mitchell translation, which is narrated by a cat called Peter Coyote. And it's really, really good. And it makes more sense than your traditional, like, King James. So you're like, I have no idea what this says, even though it's allegedly in English. But I'm going to paraphrase it because we'll just be here all day if I don't. And I think we can get the gist with the Huff translation, the Semi-Eloquent translation. Goes a little bit like this. Once upon a time, in the land of Uz, U-Z, there was a man called Job. And Job was the greatest guy around. Okay? Super rich. He had 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 oxen and 500 donkeys and 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he was a man of great integrity. Never did anything wrong, Job. And the family would gather regularly to have big parties, have big festivals, and Job was recognized all throughout the land as a man of great wisdom, a man of great prosperity, who never put a foot wrong. Greatest guy around, Job of Uz. And so it happened one day that there was kind of a heavenly staff meeting. God called all the heavenly beings together, and Satan showed up. And God looked at Satan and said, how the hell did you get in here? And what have you been up to anyways? And Satan says, I've been down on earth, hanging around, seeing what I could see. And God says, oh, yeah? Well, did you see my man Job? Greatest guy around. Faithful. Keeps my commandments. Never does anything wrong. Did you get a look at Job? He is faithful to me. And Satan says, well, yeah, he's faithful to you. He lives a life of luxury. You've blessed him. What reason does he have not to be faithful to you? But I bet, if you took away all of his prosperity and wealth, he would curse you. And God said, care to make it interesting? Satan said, yeah. God says, okay, smart guy, poopy pants, go down there and you can take away all of Job's stuff, but you can't harm him, all right? And just see how he reacts. Okay. So Satan goes down to earth. And one day, Job is just hanging out at the mansion, and a servant comes running up to him and says, Master, bad guys came, and they took all the sheep, and they killed all the shepherds, and I'm the only one who survived. And he had barely gotten the words out of his mouth when another servant came running in and said, Job, bad guys came, and they took all the camels, and they killed all the camel herders, and I'm the only one who got away. And he had barely finished speaking before another servant came in and said, Job, bad guys came. They took all the oxen. They killed all of the oxen handlers except me, and I'm the only one who got away. And he had barely finished speaking before another one ran in and said, Job, bad guys came. They took all the donkeys. They killed all the donkey herders, and I'm the only one who survived. And he had barely got done speaking when another servant ran in and said, Job, all of your sons and daughters were having a Super Bowl party, and a big wind came and blew the house down, and they're all dead. In the space of minutes, it's all gone, and Job tears his robe asunder and shaves his head and throws himself on the ground in deep lament, and then says, the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. As you would. And so a little bit of time goes by, and there's another heavenly staff meeting. And so God gathers all of the angels, and Satan shows up again. And God says to Satan, how the hell did you get in here? And what have you been up to anyways? And Satan says, just kicking around the earth, seeing what I can see. And God says, did you happen to see my man Job? Greatest guy around. You took away all of his stuff, and he still did not curse me. And Satan says, well, yeah. We're talking about some sheep and a couple of kids. Nobody cares about that. He's still got his health. When you got his health, you got everything. So he's got no reason to curse you. And God says, oh, yeah? You want to make it interesting? And Satan says, yeah. God says, okay, you can take away his health, but you can't kill him. Satan says, all right. So Satan goes back to earth. And Satan afflicts Job from head to toe with sores and boils and all sorts of awful stuff. And Job falls to the ground, absolutely beset, dying of everything, wailing in tremendous pain. And everything he owns is gone, and his kids are dead, and he's covered head to toe in sores, and he's dying from the inside out, and he's sitting in the trash heap with a piece of broken pottery scratching the itchy sores on his body, moaning, to the point where his wife comes to him and says, dude, do you still have faith in God? Why don't you just curse God and die? That's someone you want to be married to. Why don't you just curse God and die? And Job looks wearily up from the ground, scratching his sores with a cracked piece of pottery, and says, we accept all the good things from God with a smile on our face. How can we not accept the bad things? You can't have it both ways. Are we in this or are we not in this? And his wife is like, I don't know, dude. I think you should die. She probably had somebody on the side. Just a guess. I'm guessing. And so Job remains in this condition, destitute, dying of everything, for I don't even know how long. And word gets round. All right, Job, the greatest guy in the world, the richest guy we know, is falling on hard times, man. And so he's got 3 friends who live in different cities, and word gets to them. Job's having a hell of a time. And so they gather up and they come to see him. Their names are Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. You know, those guys. And they come to Job's place, what remains of it, and they see this crumpled figure in the corner. They don't even recognize him. They're like, where is Job? And then they look more closely and they're like, oh, wow, I think that's Job. And then they too tear their robes asunder and fall in the dust weeping and throw dirt up in the air and fall on the ground beside him. And there they sit in silence, in stunned, devastated silence. For 7 days and 7 nights, not a word is spoken. They just sit there in commiseration with their friend. Until finally, after 7 days and 7 nights, Job raises his head and he looks at them and he says, I curse the day I was born. I wish I had died in infancy. And he says a lot more, but we don't have time for that. And so finally, after this lament, Eliphaz plucks up his courage and says, okay, Job, I'm going to say something here that I hope you won't get too upset about. Please tell me you won't be upset when I say to you, you must have did something. You must have did something, because you and I both know that whatever's going on with you does not happen to innocent people. All right. God does not work that way. God does not curse the innocent people. So deductive reasoning says you did something. You should probably repent of it if you want to fix this. And Job kind of glares at him with the strength that he has left. And he says, God is tormenting me. If you're so friggin' smart and you think I'm at fault for this, tell me, what do you think I did? You know me. You know I'm an upstanding man. You know that I keep God's commandments and I never do anything wrong. You know as well as I do. So, if I'm guilty, if I'm at fault, tell me, poopy pants, what did I do? Eliphaz does not have an answer for that. Bildad does, though. Bildad says, are you done? Job does a long rant, and Bildad's like, are you done now? Are you done whining? Because I agree. If you didn't do something, then probably your kids did something. And you're suffering for the sins that your kids committed. Because we know how this goes. So you better call out to God and ask forgiveness on your behalf, on their behalf, if you want to fix this. And Job turns his head to look at Bildad. And he says, what would be the point? What would be the point of asking God for anything? And there's a deep bitterness setting in on Job, and you can understand why. What would be the point of humbling myself before God? What would be the point of calling out to him? Do you see him any place? Do you hear him any place? God does whatever he wants. Nobody understands why. He does whatever he wants. I call out to him. I hear nothing. Doesn't show himself to me. I look around. I see bad people doing bad stuff everywhere with impunity. They get away with everything. I'm a good, upstanding person. I do all the good stuff. I give money to those guys who stand on the traffic median. Here I am cursed, and I ask God why, and I get no answers whatsoever. And so Bildad holds his tongue. And then Zophar steps up and he says, Job, you're talking a lot of crap here. In fact, based on what I'm hearing coming out of your mouth, you're probably not getting punished as harshly as you deserve. There's a pal for you. Hey, look, jerk. You're talking a lot of crap. You're probably not getting it as bad as you deserve based on your attitude. You better act right, or it's going to get even worse from here. And Job says, that's very easy for you to say, Zophar. Your ass isn't covered in boils right now. You haven't lost everything. It's very easy for you to sit there and judge my character, judge my attitude, when your kids aren't dead and your oxen aren't gone and you're not covered head to toe in sores. And I don't want to argue with you in any case. I don't want to argue with any of you guys. I want to argue with God. God did this. And I don't want you to tell me or speculate on what I did wrong. I want him to tell me what I did wrong. But I call out and ask for an answer to that, and all is silence. Eliphaz, the first guy, works up his courage. Job, you're on dangerous ground here. Here's the truth. All humans are sinners. Now, you can't possibly be as perfect as you claim to be. We're all sinners. Like Chris Rock will eventually say, there's a reason to hit everybody. God's hitting you. And we know that bad things happen to bad people. You claim people get away with everything, but you know in your heart that bad things happen to bad people. So you better think about that. And Job sighs. And he looks at them and he says, you guys really suck at comforting people. You guys really suck, man. God's using me for friggin' target practice over here. And you're just piling on. Right? This is your version of comfort. You come from miles away and you sit here for 7 days saying nothing. And then your answer is, it's all my fault and I better confess my sins and get it straight. Thanks. Really appreciate you dropping by. And then Bildad, the second guy, says, quit whining, man. If for 5 friggin' seconds you could get over yourself and listen to what we're saying, you will understand. Your anger is not helping here, okay? It's making it worse. Bad things happen to bad people, and you say they get away with everything, but we know all bad guys have to suck the pipe, man. Eventually, they all get it. We know that. Job says, I'm not responsible. I'm not evil. I'm not the evil one. God did all of this. I didn't do any of this. God did this to me. I used to be the best guy around. I used to be respected by everyone. I would walk into the town square and people would fall silent. People would come to me for help and advice, and I would give it. I was esteemed and I was respected, and now people mock me. Kids run by, kids whose fathers I wouldn't let look after my dogs, come by now and they mock me. They spit on me. I haven't done anything wrong. All I want is for God to tell me why he's doing this to me when I don't deserve it. What is the point of being a good person if this is your reward? God will just crap on you like this. I want answers to this, and I'm not getting any answers to this, and you guys aren't helping. Zophar, the third guy, agrees with the others again. Look, we all know bad people get theirs in the end, Job. You can't claim that. You can't claim that it's willy-nilly. Bad guys get theirs in the end. And who are we to know? God's almighty power anyways. How do we know? How do we know what it's all about? Job says, dude, look at me. You think I have no right to complain about all of this? You think I have no case here? Take a look around. Everything I have is gone. My wife wants me to die. I stink. My breath is bad. I'm dying of everything. I'm covered in sores. I am in eternal, tormenting pain. And you think I have no right to complain? You think I brought this upon myself? You think God is so perfect and so wise that I don't have a case here? Look around. People are out there robbing widows. People are out there stealing from orphans, killing people, doing bad stuff. They get away with it all the time. Where is the justice? I'm just looking for some justice here, friends. And this goes on and on and on and on. At one point, one of them says, well, yeah, okay. We see your circumstances. We see everything that's fallen upon you. You must have done some heavy stuff, man. Like, what did you do? It must be heinous what you do that you are struggling so badly, that you've been plagued so badly. You need God's correction. You need to humble yourself. And again, Job is like, where is God? Where is God? Where is he? I'm happy to humble myself if I've done something wrong. I just need the dude to show up and tell me what it is. You're not reading me here. I want answers. You're not giving me answers. You're accusing me of stuff I didn't do. I want God. God is nowhere. And eventually they reach an impasse where one of them says, I don't know, we're all just maggots anyhow. They have this wild debate back and forth about Job did it or Job didn't do it. And God punishes bad people, so... And the conclusion is, I don't know, beside God, we're all maggots anyhow, so what's the point? Job finally does kind of lay it all out towards the end. And he makes a speech that I think is actually worth sharing. Just a little bit. Give you the flavor. He says, I have made a solemn promise never to look with lust at a woman. What does Almighty God do to us? How does he repay human deeds? He sends disaster and ruin to those who do wrong. God knows everything I do. He sees every step I take. I swear, I have never acted wickedly and never tried to deceive others. Let God weigh me on honest scales, and he'll see how innocent I am. If I have turned from the right path or let myself be attracted to evil, if my hands are stained with sin, then let my crops be destroyed. Let others eat the food I grow. If I have been attracted to my neighbor's wife and waited hidden outside her door, then let my wife cook another man's food and sleep in another man's bed. Such wickedness should be punished by death. It would be like a destructive, hellish fire consuming everything I have. When any of my servants complained against me, I would listen and treat them fairly. If I did not, how could I then face God? What could I say when God came to judge me? The same God who created me created my servants also. I have never refused to help the poor. Never have I let widows live in despair or let orphans go hungry while I ate. All my life I have taken care of them. When I found someone in need, too poor to buy clothes, I would give him clothing made of wool that had come from my own flock of sheep. Then he would praise me with all his heart. If I have ever cheated an orphan, knowing I could win in court, then may my arms be broken. May they be torn from my shoulders because I fear God's punishment. I could never do such a thing. I have never trusted in riches or taken pride in my wealth. I have never worshipped the sun in its brightness or the moon in all its beauty. I have not been led astray to honor them by kissing my hand in reference to them. Such a sin should be punished by death. It denies Almighty God. I have never been glad when my enemies suffered or pleased when they met with disaster. I have never sinned by praying for their death. All those who work for me know that I have always welcomed strangers. I invited travelers into my home and never let them sleep in the streets. Others try to hide their sins, but I have never concealed mine. I have never feared what people would say. I have never kept quiet or stayed indoors because I feared their scorn. Will no one listen to what I am saying? I swear that every word is true. Let Almighty God answer me. If the charges my opponent brings against me were written down so that I could see them, I would wear them proudly on my shoulder and place them on my head like a crown. I would tell God everything I have done and hold my head high in his presence. If I have stolen the land I farm and taken it from its rightful owners, if I have eaten the food that I grew there but let the farmers that grew it starve, then instead of wheat and barley, may weeds and thistles grow. And so this silence falls upon the four of them. But through the whole thing, there's been this kid called Elihu, or Elihu, L-E-I-H-U, younger than them all. And he's been biting his tongue out of respect for his elders, but he's seething over in the corner. The silence falls where they reach an impasse. Job has not convinced his friends have not convinced him, and they're sitting in silence. Elihu stands up, and he's like, I've been keeping my peace over here out of respect for my elders, but I can't hold my tongue anymore. I'm friggin' furious listening to you clowns. You're old, but that doesn't mean you've acquired any friggin' wisdom. If you listen to me, I'll set you straight. Job, you say you're an innocent man and God is attacking you, and you want answers and you hear nothing, but God speaks to us all the time. God speaks to us in dreams. God speaks to us in nature. God speaks to us all the time about his almighty power and control, and you willfully don't hear it. How arrogant are you? How arrogant are you to suggest that you know better than God how all of this is supposed to unfold, how all of this goes? That in itself is a sin. You want answers, you won't hear them. You demand an audience with God. How dare you? God is God. Do you friggin' get that? God is God. And you, Job, you demand an audience with God? That's absurd. How arrogant is that? You claim you're being punished. You're wrong. God does not punish. God corrects. If you are undergoing these tribulations right now, this is a mercy. This is God trying to get your attention. This is not God punishing you. This is God demanding your attention. Instead, you're wallowing in self-pity. Everybody's really bagging on Job here. Poor guy. You're wallowing in self-pity. You're not humbling yourself. You're demanding answers from the Almighty as if you have any right whatsoever to demand anything of the Almighty. You're seeing it as a punishment. It isn't. It's a correction. It's a discipline. God is trying to get your attention. He is not trying to punish you, but you won't listen. God controls the rain. God controls the thunder. God makes all this cool stuff we have on earth. He made it all. He makes it real. He makes it work. And you are going to pretend that your wisdom is sufficient, that you know better than he does about all of this stuff? The arrogance is insane. Get a load of this guy. Suffering isn't punishment. It's correction. And you're not paying attention. And I can imagine Bildad and Eliphaz and Zophar nodding their heads sagely. But Elihu isn't down with them either. He's like, you guys can't be nodding your heads. You haven't convinced Job of anything. You've come in with a bunch of BS arguments. You're all saying the same damn thing. Doesn't amount to anything. You think you know the truth. You don't know squat. You're saying that he's being punished too. You're not seeing the reality for what it is. and you're piling on him in his hour of suffering, and that makes you lousy friends. None of you understands God. None of you has any concept of how all of this works. And then, a stir goes through the place, and a whirlwind appears. And in the whirlwind, at long last, the voice of God himself. And God, paraphrasing, says, "Who's talking all this trash about me down here?" He looks at Job and he says, "Is it you, Job? Is it you who is demanding an audience with me? Let me ask you something. Where were you when I made the world? Where were you, Job, when I made the universe, when I made the world? When I was drawing up the plans and measuring out the perfect length and width of the earth and the heavens, when I was making the water and making the land, when I was putting all of this in motion, Job, where were you? Did I call on you for your wisdom in how I ought to make the world?" And let me ask you something. Do the clouds obey your commands? Does thunder speak when you tell it to? Do you, Job, make the lightning? Have you considered the things I've made? Have you considered Behemoth? Have you considered Leviathan? Leviathan breathes fire, for crying out loud. Does he answer to you? Have you ridden those roller coasters? Do you command them? Do you command them to go up and down? No. And yet, you come demanding answers of me? Job, beginning to get it. Job looks away from God, because who could look at him, and says, "I didn't understand what I was talking about. I'm sorry." And God turns to the three wise men who showed up, and he's like, "You guys, I'm pissed at you too, because you guys are talking like you have any idea how I work or what I'm about, and you're condemning Job, and you have no idea. Job spoke more truth than you did. All right. Now, Job was wrong, but at least he was being honest. All right. At least Job was speaking from his own experience. At least Job was crying out to me. What were you doing? You're talking about me as though you're my representatives. You're talking about me as though you have any idea how I work. At least Job was being honest. So you better repent right now, and you better say you're sorry to Job. And you better make a sacrifice. You better make an offering to Job and pray for his forgiveness for the way you have shown up here pretending to speak for me." And the three guys are humbled, to say the least. And so ultimately, Job says to God, "Until now, I had heard about you, but I had never seen you." And I think this becomes in the end the point. I've heard about you, but I've never seen you. Right? I have heard about you, but I've had no direct experience of you. And a lot of people interpret Job this way, that they have a kind of transactional relationship with God or with the universe or with spirit. And that's the way in which Job seemed to operate. I've done all these good things. Where's my reward? And bypassed in all of that is seeing God for real, having a personal, this goes back to Martin Luther, a personal relationship with him, right? You're using him. One guy described it as kind of a vending machine in the sky, but without having any real connection. And so Job begins to get it. Job says, "I've heard about you, but I have no experience of you until now, and it's different. And I'm sorry, and I'm humbled." And then that's kind of where it ends. And God restores Job's wealth, makes him twice as wealthy as he was before, and gives him a whole bunch of new kids. And I laugh a little bit at that. It's like, we'll just gloss over the 10 kids we killed. Who needs them? Here's new ones. And I think it's 3 daughters and 7 sons again. We're going to restore everything, and pity for the 10 people who died and all the servants, etc., but you're twice as rich as you were before. You're held in twice the esteem. And Job goes on from there to live another 140 years. So they lived happily ever after. Now, the book doesn't say that Job didn't keep suffering and weeping for all of the kids who were lost. I hope he liked the new ones. And that's the end of the story. And you get to the end of it and you go, what? That's the big book. That's the big instruction on grief. But there are some nuggets in it. And I do recommend you listen to that Stephen Mitchell translation with Peter Coyote, because it's actually really, really well delivered. Like, the voice work is terrific. And Stephen Miller's translation is in kind of modern English, so you can get more of a sense of what the actual words are, because it's a slog. You read the King James, you read some of the older translations, and it's a bloody slog. Some really beautiful poetic language, but trying to suss out what it means. And then in the end, it could really be narrowed down to just a few snippets of dialogue. Job, I wish I was dead. His friends, you must have done something. Job, I didn't. I want answers from God. Where is he? His friends, bad things happen to bad people, and on it goes. And in the end, I think the point is not using spirit as a vending machine, not using spirit in a transactional way, but actually surrendering to spirit. And I look at my own past year. Now, I do not, even when I was getting ready for Millie to be put down, we had a couple of hours before that where it sucks. If you've ever had to put an animal down, it's awful. It's just a horrendous thing. And it's really, really sad. And it was and it is. And I never, though, looked at all of that and questioned why life was punishing me. Now, I didn't have it as bad as Job. Job lost everything and then was horrendously sick. And you can forgive a fella for lamenting, why does God hate me so much? Especially if he feels as though he's innocent. As his friend said, nobody's innocent, but they seem to be skating through without too much trouble. I didn't look at any of this over the past year as some sort of punishment. I really didn't, and I don't. It's been difficult. It's been bloody hard. But I've used it, as I've talked about on the program, as a further gateway to surrendering to circumstances instead of resisting them, instead of fighting them. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean I haven't been upset. Doesn't mean I haven't been angry. Doesn't mean I haven't been sad. Doesn't mean I don't walk around now with distinct fear for the future. I still do, but it has been for me, and this goes back all the way to the anxiety breakdown during COVID. All of this stuff I have treated as a call to surrender. A call to surrendering to the flow of life. You don't have to use the language of God. You can use the universe. You can use simply life, and life said, you can trust me, and I have trouble with that. I don't think God shows up in a great light here in this story. I mean, bartering with Satan over this guy, playing games with a human's life with Satan. Now, some people say God knew all along how this was going to go, and he was using it to get to Job, because Job was doing it wrong. Job was treating his relationship with God as a transaction, and that is not how it's supposed to be. And Job needed something extreme. Job needed an extreme circumstance in order to finally get that what God wants, what life wants, what the universe wants, is a genuine connection, not a transaction. I'm not a supply store you come to where you order your goods from a catalog. I want a connection with you. I want you to surrender into my flow. I want you to trust me. But you can't trust me if you don't have any sort of relationship with me. And so he knew that Job would need an extreme experience in order to have his eyes open. Okay. From that perspective, by that reckoning, you can look at it and say, well, tough love. Tough love aimed at an ultimate good goal. Why it is that 10 kids and a bunch of servants have to die, you could have just had them get mad at Job and go away, something like that. a simple betrayal as opposed to being killed. And this glossing over part where it's like, oh, we'll just give you new kids. There's a lot here where you look at God, the God character, and you're like, dude, a bunch of dick moves here. Bunch of dick moves. And you have to reckon with that for yourself. I move away from that and kind of look at the story as a whole. And again, I've been applying it to the past year of my life. And I think the instruction, if you can dig your way to it, I think the instruction in the book of Job is to surrender, is to trust the flow of life. Even though it's clunky and it's, in my opinion, not a great book, not a great presentation of that message, but you can interpret it that way. And there are lots of different interpretations. You are welcome to go and explore them for yourself. I have looked at the past year and some of the rough stuff that's happened as a call to surrender. I don't see any other way to do it. Like when I was having the anxiety, it was just a resounding kind of message. Like I can't control the anxiety thing. The world was going haywire with COVID and race riots, etc. And it was frightening time. Frightening for an empath like me who absorbs the emotion of the world. And the anxiety was an absolute fear of losing control. But that was the point. You can't be in control. You are not in control. You must surrender in some way to something. Not everybody can do that. I haven't been great at it myself, but I'm trying. And so I don't look at the past year as some sort of punishment. There is cause and effect. I will not deny that. There is cause and effect, and I've had to take responsibility for what I've had to take responsibility for. Some of it's on me. I own that. You try to do better in the future. You take it as lessons. You take it as, I suppose, correction, as in the book of Job. But I've looked at it more like, okay, a new life is being prepared. I have great faith in timing. I don't always hold that faith as tightly as I could, but I have faith in timing. And for some reason, things have unfolded as they have, when they have. And a lot of that has been painful. I look at all the things that are gone from my life now that were here a year ago, and it's kind of overwhelming. When I look at it like, okay, it sucks and it's hard and it hurts, but a new way is being prepared, I guess. A new life will blossom out of these ashes. And again, it's like Satan would say, well, yeah, but you have your health. It's like you haven't hit rock bottom, Jack. You haven't gone as low as you could. This is all very tough talk. This is all very uplifting talk from a guy who's actually still got it pretty good. I recognize that, but these are my circumstances, and I'm doing with them the best that I can. And it's easy for me to say. All right, I'm not dealing with a cancer diagnosis. I'm not dealing with the death of a child. I am not dealing with the worst of the worst that humanity is sometimes forced to deal with. And I don't know how I would respond in those circumstances. I hope I never have to know how I would respond in those circumstances. But I looked to the book of Job in my hour of suffering for great wisdom. I don't think I found great wisdom. I think I found a kernel that I could hold on to, though, which is building this personal kind of relationship, this personal kind of faith in the flow of life. I believe there is a wisdom. I don't know how you define it. I don't know if it's conscious. I think there's consciousness, and I think there is a flow of wisdom in life that it's hard for me to say you can trust or you can surrender to, because again, other people have such heinous circumstances that you look at that and you go, how can this be? How can this be for the greater good? You know, how can you surrender to this? And I understand the anger. I understand the bitterness that a lot of people have. And I can't speak for them. I am not in their shoes. I am in my shoes. I've looked at some of the tough stuff that's happened in my life over the past year. I have treated it as a call to surrender. I have treated it as a life ending, but a new life opening. And I think to the extent that it's possible, it's important to have an optimistic view, not a rose-colored glasses view. Reality is reality. But if you can look at difficult circumstances and try to imagine that a new start is possible or that something good can come from it, I know that doesn't work in all circumstances. I don't know how you deal with those. I can only deal with mine. And so I'm looking at the losses and I'm looking at the scary level of change that's going on, but trying to hold on to this idea that the timing is good, the timing is right, that something new and good and better can eventually come out of the ashes of everything that's fallen away. And if that's Pollyanna, it's Pollyanna, but it's better than lamenting. The lamenting, there's a season for the lamenting, but eventually, if you hold on to the lamenting, you can't move forward, and I think it attracts more lamenting into your life. Suffer. And there are times when you have to suffer, and I have done so, and it sucks. And all you can do is the best you can do. I recognize that. I didn't have it as bad as Job, but I've had my own version. And, when I'm waiting the couple of hours between when we know my cat has to be put down and when she's actually put down, that's an awful period of time. And I got lost a little bit in my own lament, and I think that's okay. I was losing a friend. She's been my constant companion for 13 years. And it's tough with an animal because you can't reason with them. You can't talk to them, really. They can't talk to you, and you don't know what they understand and what they don't. And it's easy to humanize that. It's easy to put personification on that. It's easy to transfer your own emotions onto the animal, who probably doesn't have any conscious understanding of this at all, just is suffering and wants to not be suffering. You do the right thing for them, but it hurts, and it's a loss. And I got caught for a moment in just wondering why all of this loss, but then holding on to this idea that there's a reason for it, or reasons. And, not knowing the end date of this contract, being stuck just a little bit in moving forward, but then being pulled back. This sort of overarching voice that says, trust. Trust the timing. Trust the circumstances. Believe that wisdom can be found here, that a deeper faith and confidence can be found here, and that a new and better life can unfold from the ashes of your current one. And that's where I am with the book of Job. Read it if you like, listen to it. The Peter Coyote version is actually pretty compelling listening, and there's some beautiful language in it, but it's an investment of time and attention, no doubt. Speaking of time, it's time for me to go. That's about 45 minutes. Thank you ever so much again for listening. I want to give a shout out to the great Aaron Gangbar, who left me an Apple Podcasts review celebrating the Martin Luther and Me episode. Thank you ever so much. And if you haven't, please consider dropping a rating and review on Apple for me or on Spotify. It helps. All right, it just helps. It helps the show get noticed. I'm fighting an uphill battle against very famous podcasters with big budgets. So every little bit helps me, and ratings and reviews are a big part of that. Thank you so much. If you're getting something from these episodes, please share them. Please drop me a line and let me know if you like what I've been talking about these days, if these episodes are doing it for you. If you want to hear something different, I am open to suggestion, all right? If you're going through a tough time, try to surrender to it. Try to hold on to this idea that something good can come of it. And I genuinely hope you're okay. I know life can be bloody rough, and I know these are uncertain times, and I get scared about stuff, and I get angry about stuff too. As Job's friends said, we're all human. We all have our weaknesses and insecurities. We are none of us perfect. But I'm trying to be a little bit better every day, and I hope you are too. With that in mind, good things happen when you put yourself out there, and I will talk to you very soon.